All right, guys, now we're moving on to helminthic infestations. And this is when we're talking about those macroscopic eukaryotic worms, right? And remember, they're still part of microbiology because they are, when they're in their egg form, they're microscopic, so you need microscopes to see them. And then two, they still cause all sorts of nasty, disgusting things like infestations, right? So let's move on to tapeworms. I think that's the first one. Yes, it is. Guys, I have so many stories about tapeworms. So many, because you might find this really disgusting, but it's okay. You can look it up. In Ethiopia, it's actually considered like a luxury to eat raw meat. I'm just gonna let that sit. It's considered like a treat, like you know when you go to the grocery store and you're like, oh, I'm gonna buy this olive paste. That's a little treat for me, like something that you don't normally have in your fridge. It's exciting. In Ethiopia, it's to eat raw meat. It's a big deal there. So anyways, so because of that, tapeworms are rampant in Ethiopia. And I have 1,000,007 stories, a lot of stories about tapeworms. So first off, what are tapeworms? They are a cystode, right? So this is basically a worm that is segmented and flat. This segmented and flat worm actually does not have its own digestive, like it doesn't have, not a digestive system. It obviously has means of like obtaining nutrients and everything. It doesn't have basically a way, like it doesn't have a mouth or an anus. That's essentially what it is. It doesn't have that kind of system like we do. These are more of a primitive kind of animal. So what they end up doing is that they actually absorb the nutrients through their skin, through their like nasty, disgusting skin. And so this is why they're flat, just basically to increase that surface area, to allow for most of their skin, also known as the cuticle, to absorb the nutrients around it. Okay, so it doesn't actually have a mouth or anything like that. You may think that it has a mouth because it has something known as a sucker, which is, oh, look at that, a sucker, and then the hooks, which is what it actually uses to basically just latch on to the small intestine, like to the lining of your small intestine or wherever. That's what it uses to latch onto it. But it doesn't actually suck anything through the suckers. It doesn't eat through that. It eats by basically like kind of absorbing everything through its flattened body. Okay. Yeah, so they lack their own digestive system in the sense that they don't have means of they don't have like a mouth and an anus, etc. Okay, so signs and symptoms of having a tapeworm. Now, the signs and symptoms, honestly, a lot of people are asymptomatic. They may have tapeworms and they don't have any actual issues, but things can get bad, and or you can have like other things like weight loss. In fact, I believe there was a mom in there's probably many cases, but this case really like stuck to me. There was a mom in Australia who was really obsessed with her kid being in the beauty pageant and just making her sure that she had the correct weight, I guess, to enter to the beauty pageant, and she purposely infested the daughter with a tapeworm. So terrifying. But yes, you do, if you're not asymptomatic, and the majority of cases are asymptomatic, you can have abdominal pain, weight loss, diarrhea, etc. Right? And people, yeah, you can have that thing. In addition, some people, depending on how long the tapeworm can grow, because if you don't get rid of it immediately, this disgusting little tapeworm can grow for a really long time, and it can even get up to like 4 meters, really big. And so it can cause intestinal blockage. It can even, I've heard of cases where because of tapeworms, the person I'm thinking about, her, now you know it's a girl, but her intestine just got like completely like crazy, just convoluted kind of thing, because this tapeworm was just rampant and growing and growing and growing. So you can have really bad problems there. In addition, it's sometimes we can accidentally ingest the eggs of a tapeworm. And when that happens, the eggs can lodge themselves in the muscles. If they lodge themselves in the muscles, it actually isn't that big of a deal. But if they lodge themselves in any place like the brain, there it can happen. There you can have issues, like neurological issues can come about. So it's not necessarily pretty. I don't think it's pretty, even though a lot of times you don't even feel the symptoms. And you don't want something like that. So you may be thinking, okay, if I don't feel the symptoms, how the heck, like most of the time, how the heck do I know that I have a worm growing in my body? And it's actually quite easy. It's quite easy. to see. Basically, in one species, you would find little small bits of proglottids. So proglottids are, you see how there's all these little segments right here? This is one proglottid, and each proglottid has a male and a female part. So they're like mature, like male and female reproductive organs. And so they can actually kind of mate with each other and form the eggs. And so a proglottid can be teeming, can mature into a gravid, and a gravid can be is just basically a matured proglottid that has many, many eggs because it's mated. So, and each proglottid, and you usually shed about like 6 proglottids a day in your feces. It depends also on what kind of tapeworm. I'm a little bit of, not an expert on tapeworms, but I just know a lot about tapeworms. I've never had a tapeworm, just if you were thinking about it. Just want to put that out there. I never had it actually because I think my saving grace was amoeba. I'm going to digress for 2 seconds. So I had amoeba when I was little. I was a baby and I had amoebic dysentery, so I almost died. Your girl almost died. This wouldn't have been happening. Just imagine. But yeah, I had amoebic dysentery when I was little. And because of that, they say that if you have issues with your intestines and everything, the tapeworm doesn't latch onto you. So yeah, it's also known as a solitary tapeworm. And in fact, a lot of people in Ethiopia, I think this is kind of wrong. Like I know this is wrong, but sometimes they tend to diagnose themselves. Like if they get a tapeworm, they're actually happy about it because that means nothing else is wrong in their tum-tums. So that's what they think. That's not necessarily true. But yeah, so that's maybe the reason why I've never had tapeworm, because I did live in an area that had, so you see that basically like tapeworms usually found in more rural kind of poorer areas and in places that are like kind of close to livestock, and not necessarily because I ate raw food, right? Not necessarily because of that, but also because like maybe the food, like the meat or the pork that I ingested was undercooked. And so I could have gotten it, but I never did. So that's good because I don't want it. This stuff legit disgusts me. So kind of talking ahead of myself. But anyways, like, so when the proglottids, when they mate, basically you form a mature gravid proglottid, which is teeming with eggs. And this is what gets released. And so you can see that, so the tapeworm basically starts off with a small little like a hook and sucker, and they bind to the intestinal lining, and then they start growing, and they're growing by adding on to these proglottids. They get more and more and more, and then the proglottids towards the end, they can mature, they can mate, and then they can form gravids, which are teeming with eggs. And then once a gravid is formed, you will excrete that one single gravid, like it will detach itself from the rest of the tapeworm. You excrete that in your feces, and a gravid can have about like even like tens of thousands to 50,000 eggs on one little thing. And the point is that these eggs are then going to have to go into their second host, right? So there's different types of hosts into their second host where the egg can then grow in larva, etc. stage. So where it can mature into the adult stage. And then they go back to the human to actually mate. So they have one host that the tapeworm uses to mate in, and then the other host that the tapeworm uses to just simply grow and become an adult. The humans are the ones that tapeworms use to mate in. Okay, so sorry about this. Let's go back to signs and symptoms. So here they're talking about Taenia solium. That's the taenia that you get, or the tapeworm that you get with undercooked pig or pork. You can get cyster cercosis, which is basically when the encystment happens in the muscle or the brain. But with the brain, that's a really bad one, right? Because remember, in the muscles, it's asymptomatic. In the brain, it can lead to all sorts of neurological problems, including seizures, and that's known as cysticercosis. Goodness. So the common tapeworms of humans are Taenia saginata, that's the beef one, Taenia solium, that's the pork one, and there's all sorts of other ones that we find even in fish, right? So yeah, basically it's important to know where they come from because that's this other host that the tapeworm uses. So the larval stages, so the tapeworm kind of growing and maturing into an adult, that is happening within the cattle for the Taenia saginata, and then within the swine or pig within the Taenia solium. Like I mentioned, the nutrients are absorbed by the cuticle or the skin. The tapeworm attaches to the host tissue via the scolex, right, which is basically the sucker and the hooks. Behind the scolex is a neck region, and then you start making those body segments called proglottids. Each proglottid, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Like each one kind of displacing the older one. So that's how like the tapeworm grows and can reach up to 4 meters. Proglottids have both the male and female internal reproductive organs, and they can fertilize each other, and then each other or even different tapeworms. And so once they fertilize each other, they form gravids, which are full of eggs, and these gravids are the ones that then break off and get passed out into your feces. So each tapeworm spends part of its life in the primary host. The primary host is the sexual host, so like humans. This is where the act of sex for the tapeworm actually comes about, like so the mating between the proglottids, and then part of their life in a secondary host, which is where like either the cattle or the swine, where the eggs, because the swine just eats up the eggs that we excrete in our feces, right? Where the eggs kind of mature into the larval stages and get like mature in their adult stages and stuff. So there's all these hosts. Okay, so then we can go ahead and eat the undercooked pig or something like that, or beef, depending on if it's Tania saginata, and that was pronounced very Italian, sorry, but yeah, Tania saginata is how we call it. And then the larva can basically, like you can either get the like the eggs, right? The eggs of the I want to keep saying Tania because that's how we say it in English, Italian, but this is tapeworm in English. Tapeworm, sorry. With the tapeworm, the eggs of the tapeworm. So occasionally, even if you're the one who dispels the eggs may, through contact or something, may go on the meats or something that you eat. And so that's when we get cysticercosis, where the eggs get eaten and then they can go and form in the muscle or the brain. And remember, the brain is a really big problem. Or what else happens is that the larva can basically develop into cysticercus, which is just a type of cyst. You can imagine it just as a cyst. This cyst then is eaten up by the human. It gets protected in the stomach, and there, because of that protective covering, and then in the small intestine, it's excyst. It comes out of the cysticercus. And that's when it becomes a worm. So we can either get a cyst, an encysted like tapeworm, or we can even eat the eggs by chance. But that's a lot rarer. So diagnosis is observation of proglottids and eggs in stools is diagnostic. The eggs, obviously, you cannot see. You need microscopes in order to see that. But the proglottids you can see. In fact, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but are you familiar with tagliatelle pasta? You know the pasta that's like not spaghetti, but it's kind of flatter. So it's little bits of tagliatelle in your feces. That's what they look like. And so it boggles my mind that some people make it get so bad that their intestines get convoluted and all twisted up, because you just see these things. No one does not digest pasta. It's never going to come out in your poop. So when you see something that looks like pasta in your poop, you gotta be, It's not that big of a deal here in the States, though. You can get it, immigrants can come in and bring it in, but it's really not that big of a deal. Much more bigger of a deal in like poor rural areas, etc. So treatment, you use praziquantel. Man, that's a word I'm used to hearing. Praziquantel. Rarely surgery is needed if you remove the tapeworms from the intestinal tract if they get too bad, or if the intestinal tract has been damaged in some way. To prevent it, basically cook your foods. Thoroughly cook your foods, or even freeze your meats. This is the easiest method of prevention, and also good sewage treatment breaks the life cycle. But again, in third world countries, it's a little bit harder to control this good sewage treatment. So that's tapeworms, and I have a lot of huge stories, a lot of crazy stories about them, but I don't think, if you want, you can ask me, but now is not the time. Then we move on to pinworms, which are basically something that you find usually in kids, And the pinworms go ahead and deposit their eggs within the pre-anal areas of the kid. And so there's a lot of itching involved. Okay, let's get to it. So it's the infestation with a specific pinworm. The Latin name is Enterobius vermicularis. This is also known as the pinworm, and it commonly occurs in children. A third of the infestations are asymptomatic. However, if you do have symptoms, it's mostly just perianal itching. Because of the itching, it can cause things like irritability and difficulty sleeping. You can have decreased appetite and possibly weight loss. So this enterovirus is a nematode, so it's not segmented, unlike the tapeworm. It's not segmented, it's nice and long and cylindrical. And they do have like, tapering at both ends. And the male and female worms, they mate in the intestinal tract. So they actually have like, it's not, again, like the tapeworm where one organism can have both the male and female reproductive organs. With this, you have a male or a female worm. They can mate in the intestinal tract, and then the female, so in the human intestinal tract, then the female migrates at night to the anus, deposits the eggs perianally, and then it returns back to the colon. And so those eggs are the ones that cause the itchiness. This is the most common parasitic worm found in the US. About 40 million people have it. It usually is found in more temperate areas, like worm flies. Diagnosis is based on the detection of eggs collected from the anal area with sticky tape. So you literally put sticky tape, and then you can look at microscopic evaluation or analysis of the sticky tape on the sticky tape that you put on the anus, essentially. Treatment is I actually don't even know. I don't remember the treatment. I don't know it. Mebendazole, parental, pamoate, albendazole, whatever. This is followed by a second treatment 2 weeks later to kill any newly acquired worms is usually successful. So one thing I remember about the treatment, if I didn't put it on the slides, that means the book didn't talk about it. But one thing about the treatment is that they make you drink a lot of water, flush everything out, lots and lots, like lots of water. How to prevent this is basically strict personal hygiene, especially to prevent reinfection, because a lot of times when they itch, right, those little hands, those little kid hands, are dirty. They have the eggs right underneath their skin or underneath the nail bed, and then they touch themselves again and they reinfest themselves. And so strict personal hygiene is important. You can also launder different like linens, like bed sheets, and hand washing prevents spreads to others, and then prevention of scratching as well. And just because, why not show a pinworm in their natural habitat? Moving on to anisakiasis. So this was a big deal in Italy a while back, because like Italians go crazy for sushi. And there was, for a while, the sushi was infected with the Anisakis simplex. And this particular worm is also can cause like a lot of problems like violent abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, fever, and occasional hemorrhaging. A lot of times it's actually asymptomatic, but it can be bad, right? So this is a parasite of marine animals. So sushi is just like fish. So it is found in marine animals, and it's usually just found in marine animals. Then the intermediate are krill and fish, actually. So the krill eat the larva, the fish eat the krill, and then in the fish, the worm essentially makes eggs, and then the marine mammals excrete the eggs, and then the eggs outside develop into the larval stages. The larvae swim freely, they get eaten by the krill, and then it keeps going. So humans are not actually part of this cycle, but we can be accidental hosts because, and actually dead end hosts, because once the worm gets to us, it doesn't spread. But we can get it by eating raw fish, essentially, or undercooked fish or something like that, basically infected raw fish. Okay. Yeah, so humans become accidental hosts by eating infected fish. Yeah, I feel like I need to tell you more. I'm gonna look at the book a second, because I feel like that's a very short thing for anisakis. Yeah. Okay, yeah, here I'm reading it. Oh, yes, I forgot to mention. So some people can become sensitized to this, and when they become sensitive, because they have multiple occurrences with it, when they become sensitized, they can have like an allergic reaction, and they can even develop a rash or even go through like an anaphylactic shock or something like that. So they can become sensitized. You can even cough up the actual worms. So I'm looking this up because I honestly don't know that much about it. But you can even cough up the actual adult worms. On top of having all these things, all the vomiting, fever, and abdominal pain, etc. So, yeah. Diagnosis is made by endoscopic observation of the worm. Some people even say that they feel it like coming in, like while they eat the stuff, they can feel the worm. Oh my gosh, I can't even. Treatment is by physical removal with forceps. Fun. And then the best prevention is to eat only thoroughly cooked fish, so avoid undercooked or raw fish. That is it for chapter 23. That was kind of fun, right? The helminths were kind of a fun part. And I shall see you guys in chapter 24. Bye, guys.